Hello there, friends. It's Jimmy Maverick. Welcome to another edition of the Fantasy Maverick podcast. And today we are going to talk about the waiver wire pickups that you need to target in on for week 4. And we're also going to just talk about the general craziness of the NFL this week. Again, Gonzo point totals across the board. So anyway, stay tuned for that. Here we go.
Listen up. It's time for the Fantasy Maverick podcast, starring the guy who's going to help you win that fantasy championship, Jimmy Maverick.
Hello there, friends. It's Jimmy Maverick. Welcome to another edition of the Fantasy Maverick podcast. And can I just say that the NFL football this season is insane? It's crazy. I cannot believe what I'm seeing out there. I mean, just some of these things that these points that some players are getting. Russell Wilson and the Seattle Seahawks are running ahead of the 2013 Denver Broncos, the one with Peyton Manning, where Peyton Manning scored 55 touchdowns. Well, Russell Wilson is outpacing that right now. You've got players like Alvin Kamara, who for 2 weeks in a row has scored 40 fantasy points. It's crazy nuts what's going on. You've got a situation where it's almost as if a player doesn't do good unless he gets you 2 touchdowns. It's like a guy that gets 1 touchdown is like, he did okay. That's not supposed to happen, man. I mean, these multi-touchdown players each week, I just have to say, where's the defense? There's no defense this year. It is all offense, and it is off the rails. I had 2 teams score almost 200 fantasy points this week, and it's still, we haven't gotten to the Monday night game. I haven't even gotten to the Kansas City versus Ravens game. I already got 2 teams that score almost 200 points. I don't even know what to make of it anymore. This season is just going to be like this. And so we're just going to have to deal with it. And that's all there is to it. So enjoy the ride. It is crazy town in fantasy this year, though. Totally unlike anything that I would expect at this point in the season. This is stuff. The stuff that's happening every week now is usually only stuff you see happening in weeks 15 and 16. When teams are playing spoiler and teams are trying to make the playoffs and crazy stuff happens. That's when you see this stuff. But now it's like every week. It's just blowing up. These blow up scores. No defense. There's no defense going on out there, and unless you are playing the Jets or the Giants. Everybody's got massive upside. So anyway, I just want to remind everyone that this also is going to be the last week of no bye weeks. Bye weeks start week 5. Week 5 has Detroit and Green Bay. So if you have critical players from those teams, Aaron Rodgers, Aaron Jones, Kenny Golladay, those guys, you need to look at your lineup and see, okay, who am I going to start in place of them on their bye weeks? Do you have a good viable alternative? If you don't, it might be worth it to go out and make a trade with some other teams. We're going to talk about the waiver wires in just a minute here, pick up one of those players, but you definitely want to get yourself in position so that you're not trying to fill those slots next week, although that still might happen, but I'm just saying don't wait till the last minute, do it now, strategize for it now. So anyway, that's just a heads up there. Also, talking about trades, going back to my whole thing, I was offered a trade this past week, and I traded away Josh Jacobs. Why did I do that? Well, I got to say, this guy came to me and he offered me Patrick Mahomes and Latavius Murray for Josh Jacobs. I looked at my lineup. I was very strong with running backs because I have Miles Sanders and I also have James Robinson, and then I have like Devin Singletary and a few other good running backs. I'm like, you know what? I can absolutely improve my team by going out and trading away my number 1 running back and getting Patrick Mahomes instead, because I had Matthew Stafford as my quarterback. And as you know, he's been very subpar this year, especially without Kenny Golladay. And so hopefully I'll win my game tonight and it'll all be worth it. But like I said, it's got to be a mutually beneficial thing. He needed a running back. He had Saquon Barkley. He lost Saquon. And so he immediately needed to improve his running back core. And I needed to improve my quarterbacks. Mutually beneficial. We both improved each other's teams. So I'm happy I did it. And this is something that you should do. Like I said, look for where are you strongest? Where are you deepest on your team? and try to trade away an asset from that part of your team to improve another part of your team that you're struggling in, especially if you're like struggling at tight end or you're struggling at wide receiver or whatever, but you're deep at running back. These are things you can do. So go out there and try it. And again, just review the teams. Just go team by team in your league and look at who they have. Look at where they're strong. Look at where they're struggling. And if you have something that can complement them and they have an asset that you need, offer them a trade. It's very likely that these things will go through if you're helping their team and they're helping your team. So anyway, that's where that goes. So let's talk about the waiver wire. And again, there are decent options on the waiver wire. I'm going to go with the weakest one this week, though. Really, this week the waiver wire is best for wide receivers. So if you need a wide receiver, this is a great week for you to focus on getting one of these guys. But running backs, not great options. But again, if you need the extra depth, go ahead and do it. And there's two names that I mentioned last week that you should. Actually, I don't know if I even mentioned these guys last week, but they're still about 50% available in leagues out there. So there's a 50-50 shot these guys are still sitting on the waiver wire in your league. But the first one is Myles Gaskin, who Miami Dolphins, only about 50% owned. Last week, he had 22 touches and 5 targets. Now, he didn't do much with it. His efficiency was terrible, 3 yards per carry, but he got a touchdown. And that makes him a solid fantasy play as a flex option, and with the buys coming up, you might need someone like Myles Gaskin to fill in on a week that one of your star running backs is out. I think he's a great choice. So definitely check your waiver wire for him. Also, we got Jeff Wilson of San Francisco, who is a borderline flex play for me. Last week he had 12 touches and 3 targets. So for me, my threshold for running backs for them to be fantasy relevant is about 15 opportunities with the ball. He's right at the borderline there. But as long as Mostert is out, I think he is a flex-worthy candidate. And I'm doubting that Mostert is going to be back by next week. So that's the next name. So those guys, both check them out on your waiver wire. Now, next up we have a guy, and I cannot believe this. And again, it just goes to my whole thing that I hate Bill Belichick and I hate the way he runs his backfield, because Rex Burkhead killed me in one of my leagues. I was laughing when I saw this guy rostered Rex Burkhead in his flex position for this week. I'm like, I'm going to totally murder this guy. He's going to be destroyed, right? And then of course Rex Burkhead goes and gets 27 points, almost 28 points this week. And so I've lost that league. I just can't believe it. It makes me it just it's so frustrating. But can you trust Rex Burkhead? I can't trust him. I can't trust anybody in that Patriots backfield because it is crazy town back there. Plus, a big reason why he did so well is because he got 7 catches. And he got that because James White is out. James White should be back soon. I don't know. Obviously, what happened was awful with his father dying in that car accident, and that's a terrible thing. But he's not injured. So as soon as he's ready to come back and play, he's ready to play. And Burkhead, is he going to be fantasy viable after that happens? So Burkhead might be good for this week, because I don't know if White will be back or not. But if White is back, I really wouldn't have any interest in starting Burkhead. But he is also very, very seldomly owned right now. Only about 20% rostered. So go out and try to get Rex Burkhead if you need someone desperate for this week. Another one that turned out really good, turned into a decent backup for Todd Gurley, is Brian Hill, who had 9 touches and 3 targets. So he's below my threshold for the 15 opportunities, but given the health issues of Gurley and given the limited usage of Gurley, that's the other thing that's kind of concerning me. Gurley did have a decent week this week, but that's because he got a touchdown. But, should anything happen to Gurley, Brian Hill would definitely see a step up there. So he's an ad to just put onto your bench. Doesn't have startable value as of yet, but he's definitely someone you should consider picking up on your bench. And in a couple of my deeper leagues, I already have him on mine. So Anyway, but so that's it for running backs. Not really a lot of great options, and there's also, you might want to look at Adrian Peterson if he's still available. He's about 60% owned, so there's a good chance he'll still be on the waiver wire in a lot of leagues. But then Frank Gore, which you really shouldn't bother with. Don't bother with any Jets. They're just the worst. Wide receiver is a different thing, though, because wide receivers are much better. There's really some really great options for wide receivers this week, and a lot of rookies. And so we're heading into week 4. So this is the point where we can start to see maybe some of these rookies emerge. And a couple of these guys had great week 3s. I think they're still volatile plays, but if you are weak at wide receiver, man, these are some good options to add to your team now. And this is why I didn't want to draft any rookie wide receivers this year, and I'm really, for the most part, I didn't. But now might be the time to start picking some of these guys up. And the top one, obviously had a huge game this week. Justin Jefferson of the Minnesota Vikings ended up with 9 targets and turned it into 175 yards and a touchdown. Outstanding. I mean, that is an amazing breakout. Totally dominated over what Adam Thielen did. Adam Thielen only had like 3 catches again. Thielen's having a really bad year. I'm very disappointed with what's happened with Thielen, because he was for me, he was a decent option on my app. And so it's kind of surprising that he's struggling so much, because he's not injured. And yet, I'm guessing that the loss of Stephon Diggs really has negatively impacted Adam Thielen's ability to do what he does. So maybe the emergence of Justin Jefferson will help that as well. But Jefferson absolutely is worth adding to your roster this week. Another one is Greg Ward of the Philadelphia Eagles, just because of, again, the continued carnage of the Philadelphia Eagles wide receivers, man. Deshaun Jackson, Dallas Goedert both went out with injuries. Greg Ward was targeted 11 times, and looks like it would be another high volume passing next week against the San Francisco 49ers, who will so I'm guessing Philadelphia will again be a negative game script, so they're going to have to pass a ton. If Jackson and Goddard missed time and Alshon Jeffrey still isn't ready to come back, we're talking he could have a significant role for the next couple of weeks. So he's definitely absolutely worth a pickup as well, in my opinion. Hunter Renfrow finally had a decent week. It was kind of a struggle to figure out what was going to happen with him with all these new receivers that they added onto the team. But the fact that they had shut down that the Patriots, of course, shut down Darren Waller, the best asset on that team. And then we've had a couple of injuries, including the rookie. No, I want to say CeeDee Lamb, but it's not CeeDee Lamb. It's the other guy. I'm drawing a blank right now. But anyway, there's injuries to the receiver core in Las Vegas. And so Renfrow got 9 targets. And so that's pretty good. I'm not sure how sustainable it's going to be, because I'm sure Darren Waller is going to be back next week and have a very strong game against, let's see, who do they got? Buffalo next week, Kansas City the week after. So we're talking negative game scripts. So they're going to have to pass the ball a lot. So, Hunter Renfrow is a pretty decent choice right now to add to your team. Let's see here. Another one, T. Higgins of Cincinnati, another rookie. All right. So he is the number 1 receiver on this team. He kind of leapfrogged John Ross. Well, so that's very encouraging. Again, at negative game scripts, pass happy offense, that makes him a good pick with upside. He definitely has some ability to make some things happen out there. Let's see here. And let's go. Who's my last one? Oh, yeah, Alan Lazard. So you got Devontae Adams injured, missing time. We'll see if he's back this week. But even if Adams does come back this week, Lazard still is an intriguing option. He had 8 targets, ended up with 6 catches, 146 yards and 1 touchdown against New Orleans. So he's only rostered in about 50% of leagues, so good chance he's available on your league. And Week 4's matchup is against Atlanta. And we all know Atlanta doesn't have any defense, so it's going to be a very productive day for the receivers on this team. So absolutely worth a pickup. But just remember, he's only going to be this week, and then he's off next week. So So that's it for the wide receiver. So there are some pretty good options at wide receiver this week. And tight ends, boy, just very as usual, right? It's just a thin position, but there were a couple of guys that had really good weeks with touchdowns, so you got to be careful about that. But a couple of tight ends that I'm looking at right now, Jimmy Graham, who's been all over the place with his usage, right? He had 7 targets week 1, he had 1 target in week 2, and he had 10 targets in week 3. So that leads me to believe week 4 he's going to crater. But he's hard to trust. But if you are desperate for a tight end, I think he's a good pickup. He's already got, I think, 3 touchdowns on the year. So, he got 2 touchdowns this past week. He already got 1. He's always been good for touchdowns. And, so I think it's a decent choice. He did very well when Nick Foles took over. So let's give him a chance. And he's worth adding to your roster. The guy I like better, though, than Jimmy Graham is Eric Ebron, who, instead of being all over the place with his usage, he seems to be getting increasing usage in each game. So he ended week 3 with 5 targets, got 52 yards and a touchdown, but he only had 2 targets in week 1. He had 5 catches in week 3. He had 2 targets in week 1, 5 targets in week 2, and 7 targets in week 3. So that's very positive. That's good. He's earning the trust of Ben Roethlisberger. Ben is looking his way. So that's very good. Obviously, Ebron is good at getting touchdowns. So there's a lot of mouths to feed in Pittsburgh. But for me, he's on the verge of being a tight end 1 if this volume can continue. I mean, if he's getting 7 targets a week, that would be outstanding. And so he's absolutely worth looking at as well. And finally, the guy that I don't trust, but I got to mention it because he cratered in week 1 and 2 is Rob Gronkowski. And, I just kind of feel like we're all being conned here. And really, it's almost a fool's errand to try to play a Tampa Bay tight end. And so I wouldn't even bother trying to play this game. But if you really need a tight end, maybe pick Rob Gronkowski up. After he only had like 4 targets in the first 2 weeks. And of course, last week, after talking about how, I was only brought in to block, I knew I wasn't going to receive that many catches. And of course, he gets targeted 7 times. So I'm not buying it. You shouldn't buy it either. Next week, it's probably going to be O.J. Howard, who's going to be the best option of the 3. But really, none of them are going to be fantasy relevant. So I would just say don't bother with the situation. I would not pick up Rob Gronkowski. I'd rather have Ebron or Graham if you can get them. So that's it, man. So that's it for my starts and sits this week. I also just want to mention, going back to my app, that I've got to stop ignoring things on the app when the app is telling me stuff. And the thing that I ignored this past year, and I'm really regretting it right now, is Calvin Ridley of Atlanta. Who in my app was rated as the top pick in the 4th round. Across the board, in the 4th round, I was saying, draft Calvin Ridley. That's the guy you want to get. And I ignored it because I said, he's a 2. He's not a 1. How is he going to, I had him projected at about as fair value, value in the 40s. But I'm like, really, I want a guy like Adam Thielen. I want a guy like Cortland Sutton. I want a guy like Robert Woods. Guys that are going to get me, a high-end RB2, low-end RB wide receiver. I can't even talk right now. High-end wide receiver 2, low-end wide receiver 1 numbers. And of course, Ridley is the number 1 wide receiver, and I have 0 shares of him. And so I gotta, when my app is telling me stuff, I gotta listen to it. I ignore my app at my own peril, and I talked myself out of getting Calvin Ridley every time. And I'm like, geez, if I had taken him as my wide receiver 1, I'd be perfectly happy right now. And I could have had him in just about every league that I did a draft on. But I kept on saying, no, I'll take him as my 2, but I wouldn't take him as my 1. And so I ended up not getting him in any of my leagues. And so that was a mistake on my part. But again, when my app is telling me something, I got to listen to it because it's usually telling me something that I need to know. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up. So I hope you're all doing good out there. I actually have one of my teams is doing very well, both in points scored and in where I'm going to be ranked this next year. I'm going to this next week. I already won by a wide margin, scored almost 200 points, and so now this team is going to sit in either the second or third place on my league, and I'm going to be at 2-1. So I'm feeling pretty good about that team, and I have some other hopefully wins that will come through this evening. It's all coming down to the Monday night game. But it has been a difficult season so far, and very unexpected with what's been going on. Having Russell Wilson in one league, again, that was another league that I scored almost 200 points on because I had both Russell Wilson and Tyler Lockett. Between those two, they scored me like 85 points, just those two players. Crazy, just absolutely insane numbers that are happening right now in the NFL. But you just got to ride with it, right? You just got to go for it. So good luck in week 4. I'm going to be back on Thursday with Swami Rob. We're going to be talking about the starts and the sits and a strategy for week 5 as far as, going game by game, which players we like, which players we don't. So anyway, stay tuned for that. And thank you very much for watching. I do appreciate it. If you have any questions about any of these players or any other ones you're thinking of getting, please leave me a message down below. You can like and subscribe as well. I do appreciate it. And thank you very much for watching. Everybody, have yourself a great fantasy day. And hopefully things aren't going, if they're going crazy, they're going crazy in the right way for you. All right, man. Have a good one.